My daughter seized control of my beloved Highland Haven estate, handing it over to her husband's family with a chilling declaration. "It's theirs now. You are absolutely forbidden from stepping foot here." I managed a tight, polite smile, the true fury a molten core beneath my composure. But the moment they attempted to claim their spoils, I had a revelation awaiting them, a meticulously crafted retribution that would forever etch itself into their memories. Their stunned reactions were exactly as I'd predicted. The sting of betrayal had ignited a cold, calculated desire for reprisal, ensuring that justice would find its way through an utterly unforeseen channel, irrevocably altering every life involved. I slammed the door of my luxury sedan, retrieving my travel bag, already envisioning days of tranquil solitude at my secluded alpine lodge. 3 days of undisturbed peace at Highland Haven, precisely the sanctuary I craved after another draining week orchestrating high-stakes real estate deals across the metropolitan sprawl. The grueling 3-hour journey from the city felt like a minor pilgrimage, just to behold the majestic azure waters of Lake Serenity once more. Yet as I approached, an unsettling tremor ran through me. 2 figures, swathed in plush white robes, were casually occupying my private panoramic terrace, steaming mugs clutched in their hands. My daughter Veronica was draped against the wrought iron railing, her auburn hair gleaming in the late afternoon light. Just behind her, a man I immediately recognized as her husband, Julian, visibly flinched when his gaze met mine. "What in the blazes?" I mumbled, my grip loosening as my travel bag tumbled from suddenly unresponsive fingers. Veronica straightened to her full height, her features congealing into a mask of chilling contempt I'd never witnessed before. Not even during her most rebellious adolescent phases had she regarded me with such icy disdain. "Father, you cannot remain here," she declared, her voice unnaturally sharp, like splintering ice. "Julian and I are embarking on a private, intimate retreat." I blinked, utterly convinced my ears had betrayed me. This was my ancestral lodge. The legal papers bore my signature testament to a fortune forged from constructing half the metropolitan skyline. Eleanor and I had painstakingly selected every marble slab, every artisan fixture, every bespoke piece of furniture. "But, Veronica, this is my lodge," I began, my voice fading as the sheer preposterousness of asserting such an undeniable truth overwhelmed me. "I couldn't care less," she retorted, setting her mug down with a jarring clink. "We established our presence first, and we have no intention of departing." Julian muttered an inaudible protest, but Veronica silenced him with a dismissive flick of her wrist. Her silken robe gaped momentarily, and she tugged it closed with an exasperated yank. "Darling, I've just endured a 3-hour drive," I offered, taking a hesitant step towards the grand entrance. "I merely sought a quiet weekend." "Remove yourself from these premises and cease to trouble us." Veronica's voice escalated into a shrill shriek. "You are nothing more than an encumbrance." The word struck me with the force of a tangible assault. An encumbrance. This was my domain, my sanctuary, the sacred ground where Eleanor and I had envisioned spending our twilight years, the only place where her spirit still felt palpably near. I stood frozen, my bag at my feet, my gaze locked on my sole offspring, who met my stare with unbridled hostility from the very terrace of my own residence. Julian, meanwhile, found immense fascination in the surrounding landscape, his face burning crimson above the collar of his pristine robe. 28 years old, and Veronica was now expelling me from my own estate, as if I were an uninvited vagrant. This was the same girl who once snuggled into my lap for nightly tales, who had called me Papa, until the cusp of womanhood, who had wept inconsolably in my embrace at her mother's memorial. Eleanor's gentle voice echoed in my mind. Have forbearance with her, Arthur. The sorrow still consumes her. Grant her space, give her time, 3 years you promised. I had indeed afforded her 3 years of unwavering forbearance, of profound empathy, of contorting myself into knots to mollify her erratic whims and endless exactions. And this was the abysmal recompense. Very well. I heard myself intone the phrase acrid on my tongue like bitter ash. Very well. I shall depart. I stooped to retrieve my bag, my 62-year-old knees protesting with a chorus of groans. My own progeny was treating me as if I were less than the grime adhering to her souls. Excellent, Veronica chirped, utterly devoid of irony. Next time, ensure you request permission beforehand. Next time, request permission to utilize my own sovereign domain. I retreated to my vehicle on legs that felt suddenly alien and unreliable. Every agonizing stride was a capitulation on a battlefield I hadn't even realized I was meant to defend. Behind me, I distinctly heard Veronica's voice, a softer murmur, now detailing dinner arrangements to Julian. The formidable engine of my meticulously engineered automobile hummed to life with a reassuring purr. Germanic precision as steadfast and dependable as ever. Unlike it seemed the bonds of kinship. I backed out of the drive, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles went white. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Veronica and Julian settling back into their chairs on the panoramic terrace, already dismissing my existence. My daughter raised her steaming mug in what might have been a silent toast to their victory, or perhaps a final goodbye to my presence. The road back to the city stretched ahead, empty and long. I was driving home in stark defeat, tail between my legs, just as Eleanor always worried I would, just as I often had in life's smaller skirmishes. Monday evening found me in my study, nursing lukewarm coffee and the remnants of a solitary dinner. 3 days had crawled by since Friday's humiliation at Highland Haven. Saturday I jumped every time the phone chimed, expecting Veronica to call with some semblance of an apology, or at the very least, an explanation. Sunday brought the uncomfortable realization that perhaps I was always too quick to surrender, too eager to mollify. The phone's shrill ring cut through my thoughts, a jarring intrusion. Dad. Veronica's voice carried none of the warmth I'd desperately hoped for, devoid of any familial affection. It was cold, businesslike, precise. Listen carefully, she began, her tone a chilling prelude. Julian and I have decided Highland Haven now belongs to his parents. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. What, Veronica? What in the blazes are you talking about, Carl and Margaret Thompson? She stated her words, dropping like stones into still water. It's their home now. You are absolutely forbidden from setting foot there again. The leather chair creaked as I sat forward, a sudden tremor shaking my frame. Veronica, have you lost your mind? I demanded, my voice raw with disbelief. You can't just seize my property. Actually, I can. And I am, she retorted, her voice sharpening to a blade's edge. You hardly use it anyway, and they desperately need proper housing. 30 years of 12-hour days building my construction empire flashed through my mind. Every grueling permit fight, every impossible client, every sacrifice Eleanor and I had made to afford that dream lodge by Lake Serenity. It's my villa. The words exploded out of me with surprising force. I worked 3 decades to acquire that place. Veronica's laugh held no humor, a hollow, mocking sound. "You're being ridiculously selfish. After everything we've done for you since Mom died," something inside me snapped. "Everything you've done for me." My voice rose to match hers, laced with a potent mix of fury and incredulity. "I paid for your opulent wedding, your luxury car, your exorbitant college loans, that fancy apartment deposit. That's what fathers do." She cut me off, dismissive and utterly ungrateful. "Besides, you're old and alone now. What do you possibly need with such a magnificent estate?" Old and alone. The phrase hit like a physical blow, but instead of crumbling, I felt something harden, solidify inside my chest. Eleanor's gentle voice whispered from memory about patience, about understanding. But Eleanor had never heard her daughter speak with such calculated cruelty. "Those are Julian's parents." "Veronica." I managed, my voice strained. "Complete strangers to me. They're family now." She declared, her tone smug, and unlike you, they'll actually appreciate what they're getting. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles went white. No. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could practically hear her surprise crackling through the connection. "What did you just say?" I said. "No, Veronica. The answer is no. You can't say no to me. That villa is wasted on you anyway." Her composure finally cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. "Julian's parents have been struggling financially, and you're just hoarding property you barely visit." The irony burned a searing flame in my gut. I'd been visiting Highland Haven more frequently since Eleanor's death, seeking comfort in the very place where we'd been happiest. Veronica knew this perfectly well. "They can find their own housing solutions," I said, surprised by the unnerving steadiness in my own voice. "I can't believe how utterly selfish you've become." Veronica's voice climbed toward hysteria. "Mom would be ashamed of you. That crossed every conceivable line. Eleanor would never have supported this brazen theft, this manipulative exploitation of a grieving husband's love for his only child. Your mother would be horrified by what you've become." I said quietly, the words a chilling pronouncement. Veronica's intake of breath was audibly sharp. "How dare you?" I hung up. For the first time in 3 years, I had hung up on my daughter. The phone sat silent in my lap as my heart hammered a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, head against my ribs. The city's distant murmur offered its usual soundtrack, but the sanctuary of my study now felt imbued with a new unsettling current. The phone's immediate insistence shattered the quiet once more. "Veronica" illuminated the screen. I silenced it with a decisive swipe. The night stretched out an impenetrable canvas sleep, a forgotten luxury. I remained ensconced in my study's deep leather chair for hours, dissecting every syllable of Veronica's audacious proclamation. The former quiet of the room had been replaced by a nascent tension, a brewing storm. As dawn painted the sky, a profound realignment occurred within me. Tuesday arrived crisp and sharp, bringing an almost blinding clarity. I brewed my customary strong coffee, opened my trusted laptop, and plunged into the intricate world of property jurisprudence. The same relentless focus that had forged my architectural dominion, now channeled into a singular purpose. Statutes governing estate transfers, complex documentation, caveats of ownership knowledge. I'd accumulated over decades, never once contemplating its application against my own flesh and blood. Throughout the day, my phone vibrated with a relentless stream of messages. Veronica, naturally. "Father, we need to discuss this rationally." Followed by, "Don't be so unreasonable." And finally, Julian's parents are arriving to view the lodge this weekend. Each message was met with an immediate silent deletion. By Wednesday morning, I was navigating the city's arteries toward the downtown towers, housing Marcus Thorne's practice. Marcus, my legal counsel for nearly 2 decades, possessed a keen intellect, veiled by an almost monastic calm. His executive suite commanded a sweeping vista of the urban sprawl, the expanse of windows framing the distant glittering ocean. "Arthur," he greeted, rising from his polished rosewood desk, his handshake firm and reassuring. "Always a pleasure. What brings you in?" I eased into the well-worn client chair, its familiar groan a comforting echo of countless past consultations. "Marcus, I require counsel on securing an asset." I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. He merely raised a single unreadable eyebrow, awaiting elaboration. "Commercial or personal?" he inquired. "Personal." I confirmed. "My Highland Haven Lodge." I deliberately chose my words, each one weighted. "There is an individual attempting to assert ownership over a property to which they have no legal claim." "A family member?" His query, delivered with surgical precision, felt like the confirmation of a malignant growth. "Yes." Marcus's slow nod was accompanied by a subtle hardening of his features. "That does indeed introduce a layer of complexity. Intra-family property disputes can rapidly devolve into protracted battles," Marcus observed. "What recourse do I have?" "Numerous," he replied, already pulling a fresh legal pad toward him, his pen poised. "Firstly, we verify the absolute solidity of your existing ownership deeds. Secondly, we implement robust supplementary safeguards, perhaps an irrevocable trust, or a holding company structure tailored to your specific vulnerabilities." "And the timeline?" I pressed. "A swift documentation review, a matter of days. More sophisticated fortifications, closer to 2 or 3 weeks. My mind raced to Veronica's text. Julian's parents. This weekend. "I may not have that luxury of time," I stated plainly. Marcus carefully placed his pen down, his gaze, unwavering, piercing the very quality that made him so formidable in court. "Arthur, are they attempting to dispossess you of your own estate?" The blunt question hung in the air, a stark judgment. My silent nod was all the confirmation he required. The professional detachment in Marcus's eyes shifted, replaced by a steely, almost paternal resolve. "Then we commence immediately. I will require every single deed, every transfer record, every piece of documentation tracing the property's lineage, its entire ownership history. I can deliver everything to you by tomorrow's first light," I assured him. "Excellent." Marcus jotted a final, concise note. "And Arthur, meticulously record every interaction, every conversation, every implied threat, every overt act of coercion. Contemporaneous records are the linchpin in these battles. Threats, coercion." These were the clinical terms for the naked aggression my own daughter had unleashed upon me. The elevator cage descended each floor, a tangible separation from the man I'd been just days prior. At the ground level, my reflection stared back from the burnished chrome doors. A man undeniably older than his 62 years, yet imbued with an unfamiliar fire in his gaze. Resolution. The phone buzzed just as I unlocked my car. Veronica, of course. This time, I answered. "Finally." She purred, her tone laced with the smug certainty of someone perpetually granted their desires. "We simply must put an end to this juvenile melodrama." "The only melodrama, Veronica," I countered, my voice remarkably even, "is your deluded conviction that you can simply abscond with what is mine." "Abscond? How dare you employ such a..." aligned with me. What precisely would you label the act of confiscating someone's property without a shred of consent? Veronica's silence stretched an unusual duration. When her voice finally returned, it was infused with a calculated softness. "Father," she began, her tone almost a purr. "Julian's parents are in a truly dire financial predicament. Margaret sadly lost her position last month, and Carl's pension barely covers their basic necessities." It was a classic gambit from her adolescence, the pivot to pathos when direct demands faltered. "That's deeply regrettable." I acknowledged my voice even, "but it confers no inherent right to my villa. You could extend your customary generosity, display some true familial compassion, such as the familial compassion you so graciously exhibited toward me last Friday at my own villa." Another pregnant silence, punctuated by a strained intake of breath. We were genuinely taken aback by your unexpected presence on our property. A courtesy call would have been appropriate." The sheer audacity of her inverted logic made my head spin. "Veronica, I am not relinquishing my villa to anyone. That decision is immutable." "Fine." Her retort was sharp, like the snap of a broken branch. "But Julian's parents are still slated to view the estate this Saturday. Their travel arrangements are already confirmed." The connection severed abruptly. I remained motionless beside my vehicle, the phone still clutched to my ear, listening to the monotonous hum of the disconnected line. Above the city's vast afternoon sky stretched an indifferent expanse of cerulean, the identical sky that had borne silent witness to the meticulous construction of my entire empire, forged by decades of relentless, honest toil. Saturday loomed just 4 days hence. The mechanical drone persisted as I sat rigidly in my deep leather chair, the receiver still pressed to my ear. Veronica's chilling pronouncement reverberated in the sudden quiet. "Julian's parents are still coming to look at it this Saturday." To survey it, I realized with a jolt as if my cherished villa had already passed into their possession. With deliberate slowness, I lowered the phone, placing it beside my long-forgotten coffee mug on the side table. The liquid within had long since turned cold, a fine, opaque film now coating its dark surface. Beyond the window, the city's evening traffic offered its customary comforting murmur. Yet within the confines of my study, an irreversible shift had occurred. How long had this insidious transformation been underway? At what precise moment had I ceased to be Veronica's father and devolved into merely her personal financial conduit? A torrent of memories surged forth with agonizing lucidity. Veronica's wedding 2 years prior, her casual call needing help with expenses. I had, without a second thought, issued a check for $15,000, foregoing even a rudimentary budget analysis. Her acceptance had been so utterly casual, as if I were merely an automated teller machine dispensing expected withdrawals, rather than her father making a substantial personal sacrifice. 8 months later came Julian's automotive predicaments. "Father." Veronica had stated, her voice imbued with that distinct inflection I'd learned to dread, signaling an imminent demand. "We are in dire need of dependable conveyance. $25,000 for a pristine new SUV, acquired and delivered within a single week." Julian had offered an effusive handshake, yet Veronica had barely lifted her gaze from her smartphone when I'd presented the keys. Eleanor's gentle voice, a ghost from memory, echoed, "Have forbearance with her, Arthur. She is still grappling with my absence." But 3 years had now elapsed since Eleanor's passing, and Veronica's grappling had transmuted into an altogether different entity. It bore an unsettling resemblance to the calculated exploitation of a grieving father's profound and desperate yearning to preserve any vestige of connection with his sole offspring. I rose from my chair, my limbs protesting stiff from prolonged immobility. The very walls of my study were a testament to decades of professional triumphs. Awards photographs with esteemed clients, meticulously framed contracts from monumental construction ventures, all undeniable evidence of a man who had meticulously forged an empire through astute negotiation and incisive, strategic thought. Why then had I devolved into such a malleable figure in my own personal realm? The answer resided in a silver frame upon my desk. Eleanor's photograph captured during our final sojourn to the villa. She was caught mid-laughter at some jest of mine, her silver-streaked hair illuminated by the sun glinting off Lake Serenity. In the 3 years subsequent to her demise, I had acceded to Veronica's every demand, paralyzed by the fear that a refusal might irrevocably sever the last familial tie I possessed. But true family did not pilfer from one another. True family did not cunningly transmute sorrow into pecuniary gain. Veronica's graduate school expenditures alone had accumulated to nearly $40,000 over 2 years. I had settled every invoice without a single query, even as her major shifted twice and her degree path extended. Her gratitude, initially expressed through fleeting calls, gradually withered, vanishing entirely, unless another request was poised for delivery. This cold, calculated pattern recognition, a skill honed over decades of high-stakes corporate maneuvers and complex contract negotiations, now laid bare the truth of Veronica's increasingly cynical transactions. Each demand escalated, each flicker of thanks diminished. Each interaction felt more transactional, less personal. I, in my blind paternal devotion, had believed I was simply providing. Instead, I had inadvertently cultivated a dynamic where I was perceived not as her father, but as a limitless financial conduit. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the 8th hour, its resonant tone slicing through the oppressive quiet of the study. Julian's parents, due in a mere 4 days, were undoubtedly visualizing their occupancy of the villa, a sanctuary I'd painstakingly constructed over 30 years. I could almost see them tape measures unspooling furniture catalogs spread wide already, mentally reconfiguring the very essence of my life's tireless endeavor to suit their fleeting comfort. Eleanor's counsel, once a bastion of solace regarding patience, had been entirely appropriate when Veronica's sorrow was raw and genuine. But genuine grief did not fester for 3 long years. Grief did not, however, strategize the appropriation of another's estate. Grief did not summarily sever communication with a father after demanding his surrender of an ancestral home to perfect strangers. No, this was no longer the mournful echo of loss. This was an unvarnished, calculated avarice. I lifted Eleanor's silver-framed photograph, tracing the contours of her gentle, familiar smile. She had adored Veronica, yet it was also Eleanor who had anchored our family with unwavering discipline. Eleanor would never have countenanced such a flagrant disregard, such an casual obliteration of my inherent rights and deeply held sentiments. "What path would you have me pursue, my love?" I murmured to her silent image. The undeniable answer resonated not as her tender whisper, but as my own newly discovered uncompromising resolve: cease to be the victim. Sleep, once a faithful companion, proved utterly elusive. My ritualistic prelude to slumber, the steamy shower, the methodical dental care, the perusal of Sunday's financial section, proceeded mechanically. But as my head met the cool linen at 11, my mind a restless engine, refused to power down. Instead of the familiar counting of imaginary sheep, I found myself meticulously tallying the remaining days. Monday, April 28th. Tuesday, the 29th. Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, May 4th. By midnight, with merely 6 days remaining until the proposed viewing, I abandoned any pretense of rest. Lying supine hands clasped behind my head, I fixed my gaze on the ceiling, allowing my mind to dissect the burgeoning crisis with the same surgical precision I once applied to intricate construction contracts. Decompose the complex problem into its constituent elements. Pinpoint the critical path, meticulously calculate necessary resources, and establish a stringent timeline. Veronica, in her hubris, had committed a profound tactical blunder. She had provided me with an exact, immovable deadline. 30 years of high-stakes project management had ingrained an inviolable truth: the party that first divulges its timeline invariably relinquishes its leverage in negotiation. That precise Sunday, May 4th, indicated a fixed constraint from which he was operating, perhaps Julian's parents' moving logistics or the looming expiration of their current lease. The digital readout of the bedside clock glowed 12:47 a.m. as the nascent framework of my counter-strategy began to coalesce. This was no longer a battle of raw emotion. It was a strategic engagement, and strategy, above all else, was my domain. Every recalcitrant client, every seemingly insurmountable deadline, every opportunistic contractor attempting to extract undue concession. Each had imprinted invaluable lessons concerning human psychology and the subtle art of leverage. Rule 1. Never negotiate from a position of desperation. Veronica, in her profound miscalculation, still perceived me as the desolate widower, desperate to cling to any semblance of familial connection, a perception that had held true for 3 long years. But desperate men do not terminate calls with their daughters, nor do they retain formidable legal counsel. Rule 2. Information asymmetry dictates outcomes. Veronica presumed she held complete knowledge of my circumstances, the pliant, grieving father, incapable of refusing his daughter's every whim. She remained blissfully unaware of my recent consultation with Marcus Thorne, or the expedited documentation review already underway. Rule 3. Timing is the supreme arbiter. 6 days from her perspective likely felt precipitously rushed, allowing little scope for contingency planning. From my vantage point, however, 6 days provided ample latitude to meticulously orchestrate something undeniably elegant. My thoughts drifted to Frank Morrison, the developer who had relentlessly attempted to strong-arm me out of the prestigious Harbor District project back in '98. Morrison had believed he held the upper hand, had employed aggressive strong-arming tactics, leveraging his influence, spreading calculated disinformation about my firm's integrity. Sound familiar? I'd allowed him the illusion of control, subtly diverting his core team of top-tier architects and structural engineers. When his entire venture teetered on the brink, I was there not to rescue, but to acquire his now desperate clients at a substantial premium. The blueprint for victory felt almost identical. Veronica believed she was cornering me, forcing my capitulation. Instead, she was unwittingly granting me the precise window I needed to meticulously calibrate my counter-strike. My phone vibrated with an incoming text. Veronica, predictably. Father Julian's parents have secured a removal service for Sunday. There's no need to prolong this unnecessarily. The sheer audacity of her assumed victory was truly staggering. She had, it seemed, already commissioned the logistics of removing my belongings. The sheer unvarnished gall of it was frankly a perverse masterclass in tactical preemption. In business, one often projects certainty, even when wielding the flimsiest hand. But this specific maneuver was a well-worn page from an old playbook. I recalled Reginald Carmichael, a rival developer from '08, who'd arrived at my corporate headquarters with meticulously rendered blueprints for a complete overhaul of a prime downtown parcel he presumed he'd soon acquire from under my nose. Reginald had been disabused of his delusions at significant personal cost, a stark lesson in the chasm between audacious confidence and verifiable proprietary claims. Veronica was poised to receive a similarly impactful education. I erased her message from my device, placing the phone deliberately on the table. My intellect, now fully engaged, began to process a multitude of permutations, the identical rigorous methodology that had transmuted a humble construction firm into a sprawling multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Inputs, phased execution, projected results, tolerable exposures. Inputs, considerable liquid capital, formidable legal counsel, 3 decades of interconnected industry relationships, and a singularly vital asset Veronica remained blissfully ignorant of: my neighbor Quentin's formidable acumen in sophisticated digital systems. Quentin was still indebted to me for my assistance last autumn, when his advanced server farm nearly succumbed to a catastrophic power surge during an unprecedented cold snap. Phased execution, 5 days for development and refinement, culminating in Sunday's decisive activation. Projected results. A total and undeniable inversion of Veronica's perceived authority, not merely preventing her calculated appropriation, but indelibly etching into her consciousness the undeniable repercussions of her blatant disrespect. The illuminated digits of the bedside clock glowed 1:23 a.m. as a slow, deliberate smile finally creased my lips in the encroaching gloom. Eleanor often remarked upon a dormant, unyielding resolve that would surface within me when provoked, beyond all reason. She'd witnessed it in unscrupulous rivals attempting to subvert my tenders through underhanded dealings and in vendors audacious enough to violate contractual obligations. "Arthur," she'd once observed, "you are amenable 95% of the time. Yet that remaining 5%, that is truly an unnerving spectacle." Veronica had never encountered that 5%. She was about to receive an unparalleled education. By 2 a.m., the foundational structure of my plan was unshakable. Tomorrow I would engage Quentin concerning the intricate technical parameters. Wednesday, I would meticulously refine the strategy with Marcus. Thursday and Friday would be allocated to strategic groundwork and tactical deployment. Saturday evening, I would make the familiar drive to Highland Haven, embodying the accommodating father Veronica undoubtedly still presumed me to be. Sunday dawn, however, would unveil a profoundly different Arthur, a man she had never remotely encountered. Indeed, Tuesday morning delivered the undeniable clarity that only a firm commitment to action can forge. I awoke at 7 feeling a surge of vitality I hadn't experienced in months. After a brisk shower and brewing my customary robust coffee, I set out, arriving at Quentin's residence precisely at 9. My neighbor predictably answered the door clad in his standard remote work attire, well-worn denim, and a tech industry logo tee. Behind the slender frames of his glasses, his eyes held the slightly glazed intensity of one who had spent hours immersed in lines of obscure programming script. "Arthur, is everything in order?" Quentin queried, stepping back and ushering me into his command center, a home office where 3 colossal monitors glowed with cascades of arcane code. "Actually," Quentin, I require your assistance with a rather inventive, technical endeavor. I took the seat offered beside his workstation, taking in the astonishing proliferation of cutting-edge hardware and an almost organic tangle of cabling that festooned every conceivable surface. Quentin's eyebrows rose a spark of immediate intrigue in his gaze. "What sort of project? You've certainly piqued my interest." "Advanced property management," I began. "Something incorporating sophisticated motion detection, responsive voice-activated systems, perhaps even some synchronized environmental effects." I paused, observing his expression. "Consider it an unconventional, welcoming experience for a particular set of unforeseen visitors." "Ah, this sounds absolutely captivating," he murmured. Quentin swiveled his chair to face me fully, his eyes alight with a quiet, almost scholarly enthusiasm. "Precisely, Arthur. Think of it as an interactive architectural deterrent, where the structure itself becomes an active, undeniable presence. An experience designed not just to surprise, but to emphatically underscore ownership." A rare, subtle crinkle touched my lips. The very essence of what I require. "When can we commence?" 2 hours later, Quentin's SUV was brimming with an array of sophisticated hardware, an arsenal of discrete motion sensors, programmable LED light arrays, concealed audio transmitters, miniature cameras, and bespoke water flow regulators, all controlled by a bespoke home automation interface on a military-grade tablet. The journey to Highland Haven passed swiftly as Quentin meticulously outlined the intricate possibilities. "We can orchestrate cascading sensory responses," he explained, "where one trigger initiates a sequence of effects. Motion activates lighting. Lighting cues specific auditory proclamations. Those proclamations can in turn unleash water systems. The entire lodge transforms into a sentient, self-regulating security overlay. How comprehensively can we integrate it?" I pressed, already envisioning the meticulous precision. "The only limit is our imagination, Arthur. We're looking at pervasive motion detection in every accessible space. A voice assistant programmed with custom authoritative pronouncements and dynamic lighting that reacts to even the most subtle patterns of movement." Quentin leaned forward, an almost boyish eagerness in his stance. "We could even incorporate advanced facial recognition later, if the objective becomes targeting specific individuals." "Intriguing," I conceded, "but let us focus on the foundational elements first, optimizing for our limited time frame." We arrived at the lodge just as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lake. Quentin let out a low whistle of admiration as we pulled into the long, winding drive. "A magnificent estate, Arthur. Your unexpected guests are indeed in for quite the reception." The installation process was a masterclass in Quentin's specialized expertise. Within minutes, he had mapped the precise placement for every sensor throughout the villa's expansive rooms, identified optimal unobtrusive angles for the hidden cameras, and began programming the tablet that would serve as the central command console. "A motion detector here by the grand entrance," he elucidated, affixing a device no larger than a smoke alarm to the wall near the archway. "The instant someone crosses this threshold, it initiates a disorienting rapid pulse in the living room's lighting, while a pre-recorded voice asserts, 'Unauthorized entry detected. This private estate is secured. Immediate egress is required.'" "And should they remain?" I inquired, a flicker of anticipation in my gaze. Quentin's eyes held a mischievous glint. "Phase 2. Continued motion in the living room triggers every tap, every shower, even the grand cascade in the master bath to unleash a torrent of water at full pressure. Concurrently, the auditory proclamations become far more imperious. We worked with a synchronized intensity throughout the remainder of the afternoon. Quentin meticulously ran nearly invisible cabling behind baseboards, coded intricate response sequences, and rigorously tested each component with the unwavering precision of someone who found genuine delight in solving complex technical challenges. I assisted where I could, my own decades of orchestrating grand architectural projects now redirected to this singular, deeply satisfying endeavor. The inherent brilliance of this system, Quentin affirmed, subtly adjusting a hidden camera behind a bookshelf, is its absolute adherence to legality. Motion-activated lighting voice assistants, automated water systems. These are all commercially available standard smart home functionalities. We are merely repurposing and creatively programming them to serve a unique, highly personalized welcome protocol within the bounds of private property rights. By 3 o'clock, every chamber within Highland Haven contained at least 2 motion sensors, meticulously linked to lighting effects, designed to induce acute disquiet through unpredictable strobing and flashing patterns. The voice assistant had been imbued with an escalating series of increasingly aggressive messages triggered by persistent, unauthorized presence. Water systems throughout the house were set to activate randomly and with arbitrary force after the initial motion trigger. "Shall we conduct a preliminary simulation?" Quentin suggested, the control tablet poised in his hand. "Proceed into the living room, Arthur." I strode deliberately through the entryway. Immediately, the grand living room was plunged into a disorienting symphony of flashing light and shadow, while a deep synthesized voice devoid of human warmth resonated. "Unauthorized entry detected. This domain is the exclusive property of Arthur Thorne. Cease your intrusion and withdraw immediately." Quentin appeared beside me, a triumphant glint in his eye. "Maintain your movement, Arthur." After barely 30 seconds of continued movement, the entire lodge erupted. Lights throughout the property began a frantic, disorienting pulse, while the voice, now amplified to an inescapable omnipresence, boomed, "Warning, legal parameters breached. Security protocols are fully engaged. Law enforcement has been notified. Vacate these premises without delay." Simultaneously, the unmistakable roar of cascading water erupted from every faucet, every showerhead, every toilet cistern across the property. "Flawless," I stated, a cold satisfaction blossoming within him. "Utterly flawless." Quentin disabled the test sequence, a triumphant glint in his eye. The system, he affirmed, possessed an independent power supply, rendering any attempt to disable the main breaker utterly futile. Furthermore, every function could be meticulously managed via a secure, encrypted remote interface. The remote interface on the military-grade tablet provided complete oversight. I could monitor every hidden camera, fine-tune the granular settings of each automated sequence, and even initiate manual overrides for any function. As Quentin and I gathered our tools, his professional curiosity, a quality I deeply appreciated, finally broke through his focused demeanor. "So when exactly are these unforeseen guests making their appearance?" He probed, a glint in his eye. "Sunday morning," I replied, a subtle tightening in my jaw. "And no, they have absolutely no inkling of what awaits them." I found myself recalling Veronica's audacious text, confirming her commission of removal services for my belongings. "Let's just say," I added, allowing a sliver of sardonic amusement to color my tone, "they are fully expecting to settle in with the utmost comfort in what they perceive to be their new residence." Quentin's laughter, a robust, genuine sound, resonated through the expansive, newly re-engineered lodge. "Well, Arthur, he declared, wiping a tear from his eye. "They are certainly going to receive a welcome they won't soon forget." Wednesday morning arrived with Quentin at my doorstep precisely at 8:30, his arms laden with an assortment of high-tech gear I hadn't seen the previous day. His eyes, usually framed by the slight fatigue of late-night coding, now sparkled with the unbridled zeal of a man whose sleep had been consumed by visions of technical perfection. "I had a few further enhancements in mind," he announced effortlessly, hefting a compact yet powerful projector and a discreet speaker array. "What if they attempt to disable the main power supply?" The question was a direct echo of my own restless internal monologue during the preceding night. "An excellent point," I conceded, gesturing for him to enter. "What are your recommendations?" "Industrial-grade battery banks tucked away discreetly in the lower level," he explained, his grin broadening. "More than enough stored energy to keep the entire system running independently for over a week, even if the grid goes down." Quentin's infectious enthusiasm was a potent antidote to my lingering frustration. "Beyond that," he continued, eyes alight with newfound inspiration, "I've sourced specialized projectors for dynamic wall effects, shifting shadows, transient figures that seem to materialize and vanish. This is going to transcend mere deterrence. It will be truly unforgettable." The drive to Highland Haven passed swiftly as Quentin meticulously outlined his supplemental enhancements. He spoke of motion-triggered projections designed to cast unsettling spectral silhouettes of subtle sound systems, engineered to emanate faint whispers from concealed speakers throughout the lodge, and of robust, redundant power supplies that would render any attempt to shut down the villa's new defenses virtually futile. "Your mysterious guests," Quentin observed as we finally pulled into the lodge's winding driveway, the majestic waters of Lake Serenity shimmering in the distance, "are going to believe they've inadvertently stepped into a live psychological horror film." "Precisely," I affirmed, a cold satisfaction settling in. We worked with an almost synchronized intensity throughout the morning. Quentin meticulously installed the new projectors within the lodge's primary chambers, configuring them to cast dynamic moving shadows across walls and ceilings. The effect, even in the broad light of day, was genuinely disquieting. Ephemeral dark figures seemed to subtly pace behind furniture. Fleeting shapes flickered just at the periphery of vision, inducing a constant low-level unease. "The sheer brilliance of this particular augmentation," Quentin explained, calibrating a wall-mounted unit with surgical precision, "lies entirely in its psychological impact. The human brain is inherently predisposed to seek patterns in random stimuli. These carefully orchestrated projections will compel them to perceive things that are simply not physically present." Concurrently, I focused my attention on the audio enhancements. Quentin had procured an array of professional-grade miniature speakers, scarcely larger than smoke detectors, which he strategically positioned throughout every room. The sound library he had painstakingly assembled was impressively unsettling. The distant echo of footsteps in seemingly empty hallways, faint, indistinct, whispered voices that seemed to emanate from nowhere, the subtle creaking of floorboards and the chilling murmur of wind that appeared to blow through closed windows. "The system is programmed to randomly layer these auditory effects." Quentin noted, fine-tuning the delicate audio levels on his tablet. "Sometimes a single isolated sound, at other times multiple overlapping noises. It's designed to keep them perpetually off balance, constantly questioning the boundary between reality and perception." By noon, the tranquil, serene villa had been transmuted into a chilling set piece for a psychological thriller. The new backup battery system, cleverly concealed beneath the main electrical panel, stood as an unyielding guarantor of uninterrupted operation, rendering any attempt to disable the power supply utterly impotent. "What about a visible warning?" I suggested as we paused for a brief utilitarian lunch. "Something to subtly set the tone when they first arrive." Quentin's eyes immediately lit up a spark of pure mischievous genius. "Brilliant. How about, 'Welcome to the Arthur Thorne Estate Interactive Smart Residence. Enter at your own peril.' It makes it sound like some cutting-edge technological exhibition." We devoted the next hour to crafting the perfect sign, a professionally designed, polished plaque, mounted prominently on the grand entrance. To casual observers, it would indeed suggest an elaborate state-of-the-art smart home showcase. To our unwelcome visitors, however, it would serve as an unspoken yet potent premonition of the disorienting ordeal that awaited them within. The remainder of the afternoon was meticulously dedicated to comprehensive system-wide testing and final calibrations. Quentin moved through each room with methodical precision, while I monitored the control tablet, observing as every motion sensor triggered a synchronized cascade of responses across all integrated systems. "Motion detected at the grand entryway," Quentin called out, his voice tinged with a quiet triumph. "Lighting, activating projection system, engaging audio sequence, commencing." The lodge immediately erupted into a maelstrom of calculated disarray. Disorienting lights pulsed with a frenetic energy, while spectral phantoms writhed across every surface, their movements unnaturally fluid. The synthesized voice, now deeper and more menacing, boomed its stark warning against trespass, punctuated by an orchestra of chilling whispers that seemed to coil from unseen voids. Concurrently, a deluge erupted from every spigot and showerhead across the property. "And for how long will this orchestrated spectacle continue?" I inquired, a profound satisfaction coursing through me. Quentin's eyes sparkled. "Indefinitely, Arthur. It will sustain its relentless cycle so long as unauthorized movement is detected. Even if they attempt to freeze or conceal themselves, the system reactivates with renewed intensity every 30 seconds. It's designed to discern between an authorized occupant and a persistent nuisance. Indeed, the infrastructure was calibrated to adapt to their stubbornness." We meticulously ran through every conceivable scenario, ensuring a flawless symphony of light, sound, and triggered environmental responses. The spectral projections twisted and writhed in perfect sync with the disembodied murmurs, while motion sensors, strategically placed, left no corner unmonitored. The hidden industrial-grade power banks remained utterly discreet, a silent testament to the system's unyielding resolve. As dusk settled, Quentin applied the finishing touches to the bespoke command interface on my tablet, a digital portal granting me unmitigated dominion. Live camera feeds from every concealed lens flickered to life alongside real-time diagnostics and the capacity for immediate manual overrides. "This, Arthur," Quentin announced, a wistful note in his voice, as he reluctantly gathered his specialized tools, "is without question the pinnacle of advanced property defense. Your uninvited entourage is about to experience a paradigm shift in hospitality." I paused at the threshold, taking in our collective artistry one last time. The lodge presented its customary visage of tranquil luxury, an oasis of calm nestled by lake serenity. Yet beneath that inviting veneer, an intricate lattice of cutting-edge technology lay dormant, poised to unleash an unrelenting, inescapable assault on any who dared transgress its invisible boundaries. "Quentin." I stated the word, a quiet benediction. "This is beyond perfect. It's an absolute triumph." Quentin's rich, resonant laughter filled the now silent lodge as we secured it, then made our way to our vehicles. I almost feel a pang of sympathy for Sunday's arrivals. I mused aloud, a wry smile touching my lips. Almost. Sunday, May 4th. The date Veronica had unilaterally declared as her moment of ultimate conquest. I settled into my study at precisely 2:30 p.m., the triumvirate of monitors before me, glowing with crystalline feeds from the lodge. The placid afternoon at Lake Serenity appeared misleadingly tranquil through the high-definition lenses Quentin had meticulously installed across the entire estate. Birds flitted effortlessly between ancient pine trees. The afternoon sun splintered into diamonds across the lake's azure surface. There was no outward indication of the sophisticated digital labyrinth concealed beneath the lodge's unassuming facade. My tablet rested beside my keyboard, its screen displaying the bespoke home automation application, the digital nerve center for every system Quentin and I had so painstakingly integrated. Every motion sensor was armed. Every concealed audio system stood poised. The dynamic lighting arrays were primed. Water controls stood ready for deployment, and the projection systems were loaded with their disquieting choreography. Our comprehensive Wednesday walkthrough had confirmed absolute perfection. Now the curtain was poised to rise on the authentic spectacle. At precisely 2:28 p.m., a dark blue minivan materialized on the approach road, visible on one of the exterior camera feeds, exactly as Veronica had so confidently predicted. My daughter's adherence to schedules, a trait as dependable as it was disquieting, had always been a hallmark of her character. A trait that had served her well in academia, proved devastating in her manipulations, and was, I conceded, with a grim satisfaction, now proving impeccably useful in the precise execution of my reprisal. Right on cue. I murmured, my gaze fixed on the screen as I subtly adjusted its angle for the clearest possible view. The minivan glided into my private driveway with an air of unearned proprietorship, as if its occupants possessed an undeniable claim to every stone beneath their wheels. Veronica was the first to emerge from the passenger side, her auburn hair gleaming like burnished copper in the afternoon sun as she stretched languidly, her eyes sweeping over what she undoubtedly perceived as her family's newly acquired domain. Julian, her husband, disembarked from the driver's seat, already moving to assist his parents with their accumulating luggage. Carl and Margaret Thompson, Julian's unsuspecting parents, appeared precisely as I had envisioned them well into their retirement years. Their faces etched with the subtle lines of life, yet radiating the eager, almost childlike anticipation of individuals who had just been granted an utterly undeserved windfall. Margaret clutched a voluminous purse in one hand, while in the other she held what appeared to be a pair of plush house slippers, a clear signal of her immediate intent to make herself thoroughly at home within my walls. They convened at the rear of the minivan, commencing the methodical unloading of suitcases and boxes with the practiced efficiency of a family undertaking a definitive permanent relocation. No mere weekend escape was this, no casual temporary stay. This was a hostile occupation of my cherished villa, executed with the blithe confidence of individuals convinced their prey was utterly incapable of defiance. Veronica, a veritable empress of presumption, gestured wildly toward the grand entrance, regaling her in-laws with a fervent vision of their new dominion. Even through the remote lens, her posture exuded an almost regal air of conquest and undeniable mastery. Julian, ever the complicit shadow, nodded in ready agreement, his gaze occasionally drifting upward to the lodge's expansive windows, mentally assigning rooms to his parents. They advanced as an unyielding phalanx of 4 each step infused with the unwavering certainty of absolute proprietary right. Margaret, a woman seemingly born to orchestrate domestic arrangements, forged slightly ahead, her stride purposeful. Then their path intersected with the subtle yet potent sentinel I had erected. Quentin's meticulously crafted plaque mounted with professional grace greeted them. "Welcome to the Thorn Residence, a sanctuary of innovation. Proceed with caution." The lettering was stark, the message undeniable, the legal warning ironclad. Margaret halted first, her face clouding over as she absorbed the inscription. Her voice thin and sharp, carried perfectly through the concealed audio pickup Quentin had strategically placed near the entrance. "What in the world is this ridiculousness? Who dared to put this up?" Carl joined her, his brow furrowed in evident annoyance as he peered at the sign. "Probably some local hooligans, Maggie. Just ignore it." Veronica's laugh, a brittle dismissive sound, echoed. "Oh, that's just Dad's idea of a joke. He probably thought it was amusing. Don't give it another thought." Julian offered a dismissive shrug, his hand already reaching for the polished brass of the door handle. "He's always been a bit eccentric, the old man. Come on, let's just get inside." But Margaret's indignation was far from sated. Her face flushed with a petty fury, she seized the sign's sturdy mounting bracket, and with a surprising surge of strength, wrenched it clean from the wall. The flawless installation which Quentin had spent a patient hour perfecting disintegrated in a matter of seconds, the ornate placard clattering to the flagstones. "There," Margaret declared, her foot casually nudging the fallen sign aside. "I won't have some silly warning marring our first day in our new home." Veronica, ever the sycophant, applauded with a simpering smile. "Absolutely perfect. You're entirely correct, Margaret. This is your house now." Through my array of monitors, I observed them 4 figures who had just displayed a breathtaking contempt for my property, my message, and my fundamental right to establish boundaries within my own residence. A clear warning had been issued, a clear warning contemptuously cast aside. Julian inserted the key Veronica had clearly provided, undoubtedly a surreptitious copy of the spare I had foolishly entrusted to her years ago. The lock yielded smoothly, the heavy door swung inward, and my own daughter, like a triumphant conqueror, laying claim to vanquished territory, ushered Julian's parents across the threshold of my villa. "Make yourselves completely at home," Veronica proclaimed, her voice echoing with audacious proprietary rights through the grand entryway. "This magnificent place is yours now." Margaret's delighted gasp resonated clearly through the speaker system. Oh, it's even more breathtaking inside Veronica. I simply can't believe how effortlessly this all happened. Some people are just such easy marks. The motion sensors, ever vigilant, instantly registered their collective presence. Red indicators flared across my monitoring interface, a silent confirmation. 4 distinct targets within the villa, all sophisticated systems armed and poised for deployment. Every integrated technological element awaited my command. I leaned back into the cool leather of my chair, my index finger hovering inches above the touchscreen of my smartphone, the digital key that would initiate their profound education in the sanctity of others' property. Not yet. Let them luxuriate in their ill-gotten comfort first. The digital clock on my desktop ticked past 10 p.m. with the unwavering precision of a master chronometer. Through the bedroom camera feed, I observed Veronica and Julian, now deeply ensconced in what they delusionally perceived as their master suite, having surrendered to sleep. The guest room monitor showed Carl and Margaret already lost to unconsciousness, utterly exhausted from their triumphant day of annexing my estate. The timing was exquisite for their technological awakening. My finger hovered over the master activation control, the singularly potent command Quentin had meticulously programmed into my smartphone. One touch would unleash every system we had so painstakingly integrated throughout the villa. Every motion sensor armed every nuanced audio sequence, loaded all projection systems poised, and the water controls prepared for immediate deployment. This was the moment for my daughter to comprehend with absolute clarity the profound distinction between a victim and a cunning strategist. My finger descended, pressing, execute. The metamorphosis was immediate and cataclysmic. A disorienting tempest of light erupted throughout the villa, every fixture pulsating with a frantic, coordinated frenzy of crimson cerulean and stark white. The tranquil bedrooms dissolved into chaotic canvases of light and shadow, simultaneously assailed by a deafening symphony of rushing water, as every faucet and showerhead unleashed a relentless torrent. Veronica bolted upright in bed, her silhouette stark against the pandemonium of the strobing illumination. Julian scrambled beside her, both shouting incoherently, their desperate questions swallowed by the onslaught of sensory chaos. Then a new element joined the performance. The voice assistant, its synthesized baritone, booming from unseen speakers concealed within the walls. Attention, unauthorized intrusion detected. This domain is private property. Immediate evacuation is required. Through the guest room camera, I watched Carl and Margaret Thompson lurch from their slumber, their faces contorted with raw terror. Margaret's shriek was a piercing, unmistakable sound through the audio feed as spectral shadows, precisely choreographed, began to writhe and dance across the walls, seemingly moving with a sinister, supernatural intent. "Carl, do something." Margaret's voice cracked with panic. "I don't understand what's happening," Carl stammered in reply, his words barely audible above the deluge of water and the relentless strobing lights. Quentin's meticulous programming shimmered into flawless operation as the integrated systems cascaded with perfect, synchronized precision. Motion sensors registered their frantic, disoriented movements between rooms, triggering an escalating barrage of auditory warnings and intensifying the visual effects, compounding their torment. The more they flailed, the more aggressively the very fabric of the house seemed to retaliate. Veronica stumbled into the hallway camera feed, her meticulously styled hair in disarray, her customary imperious demeanor utterly shattered. "This is impossible," she shrieked, her voice thin with disbelief. "Houses don't do this." Julian, equally disheveled, stumbled behind her, blindly reaching for what he presumed was the main electrical panel. "Where's the breaker box? We need to shut this off." But Quentin's redundant backup systems were performing flawlessly, ensuring an uninterrupted operation that would render any attempt at a manual shutdown utterly futile for days. The villa had achieved a state of technological autonomy, responsive only to my remote commands. "Warning," the voice assistant boomed again, amplified to an inescapable omnipresence. "Security protocols are fully engaged. Unauthorized occupants will be forcibly removed." Margaret appeared in the living room camera, her face a mask of pure terror, as the projector-generated shadows writhed and danced mockingly around her. "This place is haunted. We have to leave," she screamed. As Julian lunged for the front entrance, the door-locking sequence activated. Quentin had programmed a deliberate 30-second delay, not long enough to permanently trap them, but more than sufficient to induce a suffocating surge of claustrophobic panic. Julian tugged frantically at the handle, his knuckles white. "Ugh, the doors won't open. What kind of system is this?" Through my monitors, I observed 4 individuals who had marched confidently into my sanctuary, now reduced to terrified, bewildered victims of technology they could neither comprehend nor control. Veronica, who had so blithely dismissed me as weak and accommodating, stumbled through the strobing lights, invisible speakers whispering chilling pronouncements from unseen voids around her. Julian, who had planned to effortlessly solve his parents' financial predicaments with my villa, couldn't even unravel the rudimentary mystery of a smart lock. The projection systems had reached their programmed zenith, filling every wall with writhing spectral figures that seemed to watch, to judge, and to follow their panicked movements. Combined with the meticulously layered surround sound effects, the phantom footsteps, the creaking of unseen floorboards, the chilling murmur of wind that appeared to blow through closed windows, the villa had been transformed into a fully immersive, technological house of horrors. Carl Thorne collapsed into a chair, his face a ghastly pale in the flashing lights. "We need to get out of here right now." "I'm trying," Julian shouted back, still grappling desperately with the immovable door controls. Precisely 6 hours after the activation began, the automated sequence reached its crescendo, every system now operating at its peak, an unrelenting symphony of engineered torment. The integrated chaos was a calculated assault, a tempest of strobe lights, a relentless downpour from hidden nozzles, disembodied whispers and spectral forms writhing across every surface. Veronica, her composure utterly fractured, spun aimlessly in the heart of the main parlor, a bewildered figure engulfed by the surreal onslaught. The once imperious woman who had brazenly claimed my sanctuary now resembled a terrified waif caught in a digital torment. As the first pale rays of dawn pierced the grand windows signaling the carefully timed release, Julian tore open the front entrance. All 4 stumbled into the emerging daylight, their forms sagged by utter psychological subjugation. Just as they reached their minivan, my phone vibrated. Veronica's name flared on the display. The phone's insistent ring at precisely 7:30 a.m. cleaved the tranquil morning stillness of my study. Veronica's name pulsed on the screen, and I allowed myself a subtle grim satisfaction before answering with meticulously feigned concern. "Veronica, good morning, my dear. I trust your inaugural night at the estate was memorable." Her subsequent outburst lacerated the morning calm like shards of shattered ice. "What have you done, you malevolent, conniving relic?" Her voice frayed with a volatile mix of raw hysteria and profound exhaustion crackled through the line. "Margaret and Carl are utterly traumatized. They're barely able to form coherent sentences." I calibrated my voice to convey a note of innocent bewilderment. "Veronica, darling, what on earth are you ranting about? What transpired at the lodge? Don't you dare feign ignorance with me, father." Each syllable she uttered vibrated with uncontained fury. The entire residence turned into a deranged asylum, lights maniacally flashing water, erupting from every single fixture, disembodied voices bellowing at us to vacate. Fascinating, I mused inwardly. Quentin's intricate orchestration had evidently surpassed even my most optimistic projections. "That sounds absolutely terrifying," I replied, allowing a calculated undercurrent of genuine sympathy to color my tone. "Did you attempt to summon any assistance?" "We summoned the authorities." Veronica's voice fragmented with exhaustion. "They arrived at 6 this morning, conducted a thorough inspection, and declared everything to be in perfect working order. They concluded it was likely just some bizarre technical anomaly." Indeed. The exquisite elegance of intelligent home automation, I mused. Utterly defensible, completely beyond reproach. Well, that truly is a relief, I stated, adopting a tone of profound reasonableness. At least you can rest assured there was no actual peril involved. No actual peril. Veronica's shriek was so piercing I instinctively recoiled, holding the device away from my ear. We haven't slept in 8 hours. Carl collapsed twice. Margaret refuses to stop weeping. I uttered a soft, empathetic tisk. My deepest apologies that you endured such a disquieting experience, my dear. These contemporary smart systems can at times prove remarkably temperamental. Stop ridiculing us. The raw desperation in her voice held a certain unexpected clarity. This was no random malfunction, and we both know it. Veronica, I am genuinely troubled by your state. You sound profoundly distressed. I paused, then interjected with perfectly calibrated naivete. Perhaps the villa simply doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests. The silence that followed was heavy, spanning a full 10 seconds. When Veronica finally spoke, her voice had descended to a dangerous, barely audible whisper. I know this was you. Somehow, by some twisted means, you engineered this entire nocturnal terror. Me. I uttered a soft, disbelieving chuckle. Veronica, my dear, I was ensconced in my city residence throughout the entire night. How could I possibly manipulate systems at the lodge from 200 miles away? So you're suddenly some kind of technological savant now, is that it? Of course, Quentin was the true technical architect, but I perceived no strategic advantage in enlightening her about my carefully cultivated alliances. My dear, you know I can barely navigate the functions of my own television remote. Veronica's breathing grew strained, a testament to her desperate struggle with the sheer impossibility of substantiating her wild conjectures. The authorities confirmed that everything appeared to be operating perfectly normally upon their arrival. There you have it. It must have been a localized power surge or some such electrical anomaly. A power surge that endured for 8 hours, conjuring disembodied voices, sci-fi and spectral moving shadows. I allowed a subtle note of solicitous concern to infuse my voice. Veronica, my dear, are you absolutely certain you didn't? Imagine some of these occurrences. Profound stress can often induce such episodes. You know, hallucinations. Hallucinations. The word detonated from her throat. 4 individuals experience the exact same hallucinations simultaneously. Group hysteria, my dear, is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. Veronica's choked sob was clearly the sharp, ragged sound of Veronica's despair was perfectly audible through the line. For nearly 3 years it had been Arthur pleading, cajoling, receiving nothing but cold dismissals. The profound inversion of their dynamic was a chillingly elegant vindication. We are never, ever returning, she shrieked, a desperate attempt to fortify her voice against its evident tremor. It's yours. Keep that accursed nightmare of a house. A prudent decision, Veronica, I conceded with an unnervingly calm tone. Properties, particularly those with a history, can indeed develop a certain temperament, especially when their established boundaries are so flagrantly disregarded. We will find a way to expose you, Father. Mark my words. Expose what precisely, my dear, that you experienced a profoundly unsettling evening due to what the authorities meticulously categorized as an inexplicable technical anomaly. Veronica's silence lingered so absolute I almost checked the connection. When she finally spoke, her voice was stripped bare, hollowed by an unassailable defeat. I misjudged you, Father. Utterly. You underestimated a great many things, Veronica. This isn't finished. She spat a last futile burst of defiance. Actually, I murmured, my voice a silken thread of absolute finality. I rather think it is. You received precisely what you demanded a night within the confines of my villa. I sincerely trust the experience proved instructive. The line went dead. I leaned back into the cool leather of my chair, carefully placing the phone on my desk, the array of monitors before me still glowing, each displaying the now empty, eerily quiet chambers of the lodge. 3 decades of orchestrating monumental construction projects had ingrained in me an irrefutable truth. The most profound victories were often achieved through elegant simplicity. Veronica had sought to usurp my property through insidious psychological warfare and emotional coercion. I had merely reciprocated, employing a sophisticated blend of technological ingenuity and unwavering strategic patience. The phone vibrated to life almost instantly, Veronica's name flaring on the display. I silenced it with a quiet, dismissive swipe. Tuesday morning unfolded precisely as my strategic calculations had foretold. Through the villa's extensive camera network, I observed Julian's rental truck navigate the winding driveway at exactly 10 o'clock, its bed laden with an assortment of locksmith equipment. Julian himself exited the cab, his features set in an expression of self-assured determination that I knew was destined to be fleeting. From the quiet sanctuary of my city study, I watched him approach the grand entrance, his hands already on his professional tools, clearly convinced that a simple lock change would remedy their recent nocturnal distress. The locksmith Julian had engaged a burly man with practical hands, displayed a visible skepticism, even before he began to examine Quentin's comprehensively integrated security system. Within a mere 30 minutes, both men stood scratching their heads, their postures radiating palpable bewilderment. "These are hardly conventional locks, sir." The locksmith's voice resonated clearly through the hidden audio pickup. "They're part of an advanced integrated smart home ecosystem. We're talking biometric access, encrypted wireless connectivity, and robust, dedicated backup power supplies." Julian's face visibly darkened as he studied the impenetrable, sophisticated hardware. "Can't you simply replace them regardless?" "Not without a complete ground-up reprogramming of the entire security network," the locksmith retorted, already gathering his tools with the brisk efficiency of someone desperate to extricate himself from an intractable situation. "This is entirely beyond my expertise. You'd require a highly specialized technology architect, one who possesses an intimate understanding of cutting-edge home automation protocols." And I mused with a quiet internal smile. Quentin was indeed the singular specialist within hundreds of miles who possessed such a detailed, precise knowledge of this particular installation. I made a mental note to convey my profound gratitude for his thorough and ingenious work. Julian's shoulders slumped, stood utterly alone in the grand entryway of my villa. After the locksmith's van receded from view, Julian's shoulders slumped, burdened by the evident weight of tactical futility. Through the camera feed, I observed him deliver a frustrated, impotent kick at the solid doorframe before he retreated to his truck, embarking on the long, dispiriting drive back to the city. The remainder of my Tuesday unfolded in an almost serene anticipation. Veronica, I calculated, would receive Julian's disheartening failure report sometime around 4 o'clock. By evening, I fully expected desperation to propel them directly to my doorstep, seeking a final, decisive confrontation. 3 decades of orchestrating complex construction ventures had honed my ability to discern the precise moment when even the most obstinate adversaries finally acknowledged their utter strategic outmaneuvering. 8 o'clock heralded the sharp, unmistakable sound of car doors slamming in my driveway. Through the reinforced glass of my study window, I observed Veronica and Julian approaching my front entrance. their very gait radiating the aggressive, unreasoning posture of individuals who had utterly exhausted every last rational avenue. Veronica's first knock reverberated, rattling the very doorframe. "Open this door. We need to speak with you." I opened the door with a measured, unhurried motion, taking in Veronica's flushed, agitated face and Julian's tightly clenched fists. "Good evening." I offered my voice an oasis of calm amidst their visible turmoil. "And how was your day, my dears?" Dismissing my feigned bewilderment, Veronica surged past me into the foyer, her eyes burning. Julian followed his face a thundercloud. "Your lodge is a technological prison?" she spat. "Julian couldn't even breach your absurd security measures." I allowed a faint knowing smile to graze my lips. "Cutting-edge automation, my dear. Quite the deterrent against uninvited guests." Julian advanced, attempting to loom over me. "This charade ends now, Arthur. Relinquish the estate or consider your relationship with Veronica permanently severed." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that an ultimatum or a premonition?" Veronica's eyes flared with righteous indignation. "We will expose your twisted machinations in a court of law, for mental anguish, for punitive damages, for every conceivable slight," Veronica declared. "On what basis, precisely?" I inquired smoothly. The authorities found nothing amiss. A sophisticated home system performing as intended is hardly a criminal act. Her voice frayed with impotent rage. "You know exactly what you did. You engineered that horror, and we will prove it. Arthur." I simply leaned back, a picture of unflappable composure against the polished wood of my entrance. "Prove the phantom footsteps, the spectral shadows, the torrential downpour of your own terrified imagination." I countered, a hint of steel in my voice. "The official report classifies it as an inexplicable technical anomaly. Best of luck establishing culpability." Julian, shifting tactics, adopted a placating tone. "Come on, Arthur, be sensible. You're a man of advanced years, living solitary. What practical use do you have for a sprawling mountain lodge?" The sheer predictability of their rhetoric was almost comical, a verbatim echo of Veronica's earlier cutting assessment. A fascinating ethical framework, I observed, from those who sought to usurp my property with casual disregard. Veronica's composure finally shattered, releasing a torrent of vitriol. "Very well. You insist on this battle. You'll never lay eyes on a grandchild. When Julian and I start a family, they will be meticulously shielded from your existence. You'll wither and perish in isolation, just as Eleanor did." The calculated venom, particularly her audacious invocation of my beloved Eleanor, was intended to devastate. 3 years prior, such words would have sent me reeling, eliciting pleas and abject concessions. Now it served merely as definitive corroboration of the callousness that had become her defining trait. Much like your inexplicable lapse in requesting permission before gifting my villa to complete strangers, I interjected smoothly. "This is far from over." Veronica's voice ascended to a piercing, furious crescendo. "We will dismantle you. We will incinerate your standing, manipulate every ally against you. When we are through, you will crave the oblivion of having simply surrendered the lodge." Julian affirmed her pronouncements with a vicious nod. "She speaks the truth. We possess formidable contacts, influential networks. Your life will become an interminable agony." I observed their contorted features with the dispassionate gaze of a seasoned surgeon. Veronica, the very child for whom I had ceaselessly toiled and sacrificed, now openly vowing my utter ruin because I safeguarded my legacy. "Julian," The man I had welcomed into the sacred circle of family, now threatening an insidious campaign of social attrition because his kin could not execute their brazen theft. "Have you exhausted your repertoire of pronouncements?" I inquired, my voice deceptively soft. Veronica advanced her countenance a mask of pure malevolence. "We've barely commenced. You possess no inkling of our true capabilities." In reality, I possessed a meticulously catalogued inventory of their meager armaments. Their arsenal comprised psychological coercion, attempted larceny, and vitriolic personal assaults. Every last weapon had been discharged, and I remained standing utterly unscathed. More critically, their desperate, ill-conceived barrage had just provided the complete, irrefutable casus belli for the ultimate maneuver I had been meticulously refining since yesterday's insolent phone call. "Indeed," I stated, my voice a quiet, unwavering current. "We shall soon ascertain precisely whose capabilities truly warrant apprehension." A subtle shift in my tone, a calibrated weight to my words, caused Julian to instinctively recoil. Veronica paused, a flicker of uneasy recognition dawning in her eyes. Her fury had inadvertently forged a consequence far exceeding her intended outcome. "We are departing," she declared, attempting to salvage a modicum of dignity from the wreckage of their failed intimidation. "But this dialogue is far from concluded." "On the contrary," I countered, observing their hasty retreat towards their vehicle. "I believe it is quite definitively at its close." I shut the heavy door, the solid thud, a physical punctuation mark, and returned to the quiet sanctuary of my study, where Eleanor's silver-framed photograph rested a silent witness on my desk. Tomorrow my agenda was clear. A consultation with Marcus Thorne, followed by calls to a select few immensely influential professional associates. Veronica believed she understood the intricate calculus of conflict. She was about to receive a master class in the profound chasm separating mere brute tactics from sophisticated, long-term strategy. Wednesday morning heralded the precise denouement I had meticulously orchestrated since Veronica's initial insolent declaration. At 10 o'clock sharp, I was ensconced in the opulent conference room of Bradley Walsh, observing my daughter and her co-conspirators stride through the entrance, radiating the misplaced arrogance of those who falsely believed they held a commanding position. Bradley Thorne. My legal counsel and confidant for nearly 2 decades had meticulously arranged the scene according to my precise directives from Tuesday evening. Legal documents lay spread across the polished mahogany table, like irrefutable evidence in a tribunal which, in essence, this certainly was. Veronica claimed the chair directly opposite me, her jaw clamped, a brittle determination hardening her features. "All right, Father," she clipped. "Let's finally put an end to this ridiculous Highland Haven saga." Julian positioned himself beside her, his arms crossed in a stance he clearly believed exuded authority. Carl and Margaret Thompson, Julian's parents, settled themselves along the far wall, their faces a complex mosaic of anxious hope and the lingering pallor of their recent disorienting ordeal at the lodge. "I genuinely appreciate you all taking the time," I began, my voice a calm counterpoint to the palpable tension. "Bradley has a pivotal update regarding the estate." Veronica's eyes instantly narrowed. "Spare us the pleasantries, Father. The Highland Haven title. We demand its immediate transfer to Julian's parents. No more ludicrous charades. No more pointless postponements. Actually," I stated, my tone unyielding, "I regret to inform you that course of action is utterly beyond my capacity." Julian surged forward, his voice a low snarl. "Nothing is beyond capacity if you simply affix your signature, Arthur. Our patience has been stretched thin enough." "No, Julian. I corrected a subtle irony in my voice. It seems you profoundly misunderstand. I gestured toward Bradley, who cleared his throat with the precise, practiced cadence of a seasoned jurist. You see, Bradley stated, his voice devoid of inflection, Mr. Thorne is no longer the proprietor of Highland Haven. The silence that descended was absolute, stretching taut for a full 10 agonizing seconds. Veronica's meticulously maintained composure visibly fractured, a tide of crimson creeping up her neck. What exactly does that mean? Julian demanded, his voice edged with a new, dangerous uncertainty. Bradley smoothly opened the uppermost folder on his desk, its contents stark against the polished wood. Mr. Thorne, he announced, his gaze sweeping across their stunned faces, executed a formal transfer of the Highland Haven estate to the newly established Sentinel Legacy Trust. This philanthropic entity is dedicated to safeguarding properties of historical and emotional significance for vulnerable individuals, ensuring their preservation for generations. The transaction was finalized and legally recorded first thing Monday morning. Veronica's voice fractured, a sharp, splintering sound. That's preposterous. You had no authority to do such a thing. I assure you, I responded, my voice a quiet, unwavering current. I possessed every conceivable legal right to transfer property which I, the legitimate owner, held title to. Every document is flawlessly executed, every clause irreversible. Julian's arrogant posture deflated, his earlier confidence utterly dissolved. But we had an understanding, he stammered, his gaze darting to Veronica. Veronica assured us the lodge was ours. Bradley's professional demeanor remained utterly unblemished. Mr. Thorne, he reiterated calmly, could only transfer property he unequivocally owned. The Sentinel Legacy Trust now holds full and undisputed title to Highland Haven. Veronica lurched to her feet, her chair shrieking in protest across the marble floor. You absolute monster! You cannot possibly do this to us. We need that estate. On the contrary, Veronica, I observed, my gaze unwavering. You attempted to seize it. This, I believe, constitutes a far more fitting and just resolution. Margaret Thompson, her face a mask of profound bewilderment, finally spoke, her voice thin and uncertain. What does this mean for us? Where on earth will we live? You will regrettably be compelled to arrange your own accommodations. I stated, a distinct echo of her own chilling words from that Friday afternoon. Precisely as you so confidently expected me to do when you attempted to expel me from my own cherished sanctuary. Veronica's hands clenched white-knuckled against the polished edge of the table, trembling visibly. This is nothing short of pure, unadulterated malice, vicious retribution. This, Veronica, I countered, meeting her gaze with an unwavering intensity, is the definitive essence of justice, and it is irrevocably permanent. Julian's face had drained of all color, the profound financial ramifications of the declaration clearly registering. Our entire future, our meticulously laid plans. We were utterly reliant on Highland Haven to alleviate our burdens. Perhaps, I suggested, a sardonic inflection in my tone, one ought to seek proper authorization before charting an entire future based on another's property. Bradley, with an almost imperceptible flourish, spread additional official documents across the table's gleaming surface. The charitable deed, he explained, contains a comprehensive lifetime usage clause for Mr. Thorne as the magnanimous donor. He retains unimpeded full access to the estate for the remainder of his natural life. Veronica's voice, already strained, ratcheted upward toward outright hysteria. then absolutely nothing changes for you. You still get to use it. On the contrary, Veronica, I corrected my voice, cutting, everything has fundamentally changed for you. You possess no legal claim to it whatsoever, not now, and not ever. Carl Thompson, his voice barely a whisper, spoke for the first time, his confusion palpable. So we receive absolutely nothing. After everything. After attempting to expropriate my property through calculated deception, psychological coercion, and outright threats, Mr. Thompson, I clarified my voice, unwavering. That is precisely the case. Veronica sank back into her chair, the fight visibly draining from her face as the devastating reality of her miscalculation washed over her. When did you do this? She stammered, her voice thin. Monday morning, I replied, the timing a precisely delivered blow, immediately following your rather illuminating technological experience at Highland Haven. The sheer brutality of the revelation struck her with the force of a physical impact. Monday, after the orchestrated terror at the lodge, yet before their desperate, futile confrontation at my city residence. Every self-righteous threat, every imperious demand, every cutting, cruel word she had uttered since that morning, all rendered utterly meaningless the very moment they had escaped her lips. Julian's voice was barely a discernible whisper, a fractured sound of profound realization. You were orchestrating this from the very beginning, weren't you? I have always been meticulously planning. I stated, my gaze fixed on the now crumbling facade of Veronica's indignation, to staunchly protect my property from any who presumed they could simply seize it through egregious manipulation and brazen intimidation. Veronica stared, unseeing, at the legal documents that lay spread before her, her mind grappling with the colossal scale of her undoing. Documents as if willing them to unravel. This Sentinel Legacy Trust, it's just a smokescreen, isn't it? Veronica's voice was tight-thin with suspicion. A clever ruse to keep it out of our hands while you still pull the strings. Before I could utter a word, Marcus interjected, his tone calm and professional. The Sentinel Legacy Trust is an established, fully compliant, philanthropic entity. The transfer of the estate is both legitimate and legally irreversible. Julian's face contorted in a sneer. So you get everything you wanted, Arthur. A clean victory. My gaze swept over their incredulous faces. I desired no conflict with my own kin. However, since a battle was so vehemently declared, then yes, the terms of engagement have concluded in my favor. Veronica's carefully constructed facade shattered, revealing raw anguish. You've utterly demolished every hope we had. Julian's parents are left utterly destitute, Veronica cried, a desperate plea in her voice. They are welcome to seek housing anywhere else, save for my meticulously protected villa. I countered my words, echoing her own past pronouncements with chilling precision. Margaret Thorne. Julian's mother buried her face in her hands, her sobs a quiet counterpoint to the tense silence. Carl, her husband, clutched her arm, his face a canvas of bewildered despair, as if attempting to recall the precise sequence of events that had led them to this calamitous precipice. Veronica, her earlier fire extinguished, swayed precariously, her powerful indignation replaced by a palpable, debilitating emptiness. "Let's go," she muttered, her voice a defeated whisper. "There is nothing more here." As they turned, moving like somnambulists toward the exit, I uttered one last, deliberate truth. "Veronica." She paused, twisting back her face, a grotesque tableau of weariness and incandescent fury. Next time you attempt to seize what is not yours, understand this sophisticated strategy always triumphs over crude emotional extortion. The heavy door swung shut behind them with a definitive, echoing thud. Marcus and I remained seated, enveloped in a profound quiet. The formidable legal documents spread across the table, silent witnesses to a conflict I had never initiated, yet had been compelled to conclude. A truly exquisite tactical maneuver, Arthur. Marcus observed a rare glint of admiration in his usually impassive eyes. 3 decades of monumental architectural projects had ingrained in me the indispensable wisdom of preparing for every conceivable contingency, including the dignified withdrawal. I meticulously gathered my copies of the finalized trust documents, their crisp edges a tangible testament to my victory, and stood. It was time. Time to journey to Lake Serenity to reclaim my lodge and bathe in its undisturbed tranquility. The dawn that broke on Thursday morning was for the first time in 3 long years observed without the gnawing pangs of apprehension, without the fiery sting of resentment, without the incessant clamor of tactical calculation. I navigated the winding mountain roads toward Lake Serenity, the burgeoning spring landscape of the Cascades unfolding around me, and in my chest I felt a quiet, profound sensation I had almost forgotten, genuine serenity. The lodge greeted my arrival with a palpable stillness, the silence of a cherished sanctuary that had at long last been wholly restored to its true custodian. I inserted my key, no longer glancing nervously over my shoulder, stepped across the threshold without bracing for an audible confrontation, and walked through rooms that, despite their recent ordeal as a digital battleground, now felt inexplicably purified. My immediate priority was the meticulous demobilization of our strategic defenses. Quentin's concealed cameras, their sophisticated mounting mechanisms, now yielding readily to my deliberate touch, and simple tools were swiftly dislodged. The ubiquitous motion sensors, the disembodied voice assistant units, the insidious projection systems, each intricate component of our elaborate psychological deterrent, was carefully detached, methodically packed into crates, awaiting return to my exceptionally resourceful ally. In less than 2 hours, the villa had shed its high-tech armor, gracefully reverting to its innate, tranquil essence. No longer were there pulsating lights, no covert audio pickups, no intricate technological sentinels vigilantly scanning for unseen incursions, simply a grand house by a magnificent lake, now legally held by a benevolent foundation, inhabited by a man who had finally transcended the necessity of defending his sanctuary from his own blood. I prepared a fresh pot of coffee, utilizing the very same machine that had silently presided over Sunday's meticulously orchestrated pandemonium, then carried my steaming mug to the sprawling panoramic terrace, the hallowed space where Eleanor and I had savored an eternity of serene dawns. The azure expanse of Lake Serenity stretched before me, its surface now mirroring the late morning sun in a resplendent dance of radiant promise, rather than an ominous reflection of looming danger. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, I found myself capable of profound stillness. The totality of this internal metamorphosis felt almost preternatural in its sudden, undeniable completeness. Merely 3 years prior, I had been a shattered man, a widower adrift, tragically misinterpreting tender affection as a license for unconditional capitulation, mistaking gentle understanding for inherent vulnerability, and conflating familial devotion with a passive acceptance of egregious imposition. The formidable individual who had meticulously forged an architectural empire from sheer ambition had, in the throes of sorrow, inexplicably abandoned the fundamental imperative of safeguarding his own inviolable parameters. Eleanor's gentle voice now resonated through the chambers of my memory, sharper, clearer, utterly unblemished by the distorting lens of my grief and Veronica's cunning manipulation. "Be forbearing with her, Arthur," she had urged. "Her sorrow still consumes her." Yet Eleanor had never, not once, intended for such forbearance to metastasize into an endless state of self-immolation. She would never have countenanced that profound affection necessitated the passive endorsement of outright larceny, flagrant manipulation, and insidious psychological warfare. The remarkable woman who had chosen to bind her life to a fiercely resolute entrepreneur would never have wished for him to devolve into a mere stepping stone, not even for the sake of their beloved daughter. True kindness, I now understood, was not synonymous with boundless. True compassion, I mused aloud to the silent expanse of the terrace, was not synonymous with boundless capitulation. What I had once perceived as virtue had merely been a surrender to my own profound vulnerabilities. The majestic peaks surrounding Lake Serenity, immutable sentinels of the landscape, seemed to affirm this nascent truth. Nature in its very essence articulated boundaries. The lake's sapphire expanse remained contained by its shores. The ancient pines clung steadfastly to their bedrock. The seasons progressed with unyielding cadence, oblivious to human whim. Veronica had for 3 arduous years meticulously probed my personal fortifications, discerning with chilling precision how easily they might be breached, eroded, or simply disregarded. Each successful maneuver, each calculated extraction had solidified her conviction that paternal affection equated to unconditional surrender, that kinship provided an open-ended mandate to my entire accumulated fortune. I, through my own lamentable acquiescence, had unwittingly instilled this very perception. Every check extended, every unreasonable demand, placated every fleeting moment of quiet, purchased at the cost of my enduring dignity. While the technological countermeasure had been profoundly gratifying, its ultimate necessity felt oddly diminished. The true triumph I now recognized resided in a far simpler, more indelible transformation. It was the quiet strength of finally articulating no. It was the visceral understanding that self-preservation was not a form of cruelty, but an act of profound psychological integrity. It was the stark realization that certain relationships, poisoned by imbalance, could not endure the introduction of genuine, unwavering boundaries. My phone, a ubiquitous companion in recent weeks, had maintained a profound silence for the past 24 hours. Not a single frantic call from Veronica, no veiled threats from Julian, no frantic attempts to exploit ambiguities in the philanthropic transfer. They had, with a chilling finality, absorbed the undeniable truth I had witnessed unfold in Bradley's formidable office. The protracted engagement had concluded, and their defeat was absolute. Yet far more significant than their utter rout was the remarkable resurgence of my own spirit. The desolate widower adrift in sorrow, who had pathetically conflated cynical exploitation with filial affection, had vanished. In his stead sat a man who had reclaimed his inherent value, a man who comprehended that authentic compassion demanded unwavering resolve, not crippling timidity. Eleanor Washnew would have looked upon me with a quiet pride, perhaps not for the intricate orchestrations of my reprisal, but certainly for the rediscovery of my own dignity, for the profound realization that safeguarding oneself was in its purest form an act of enduring love. Love for the hallowed memory of my cherished Eleanor. Love for the fundamental integrity of my own being. Love for the nascent possibility that genuine connections predicated on reciprocal deference might yet unfold in the uncharted terrain of my future. The late afternoon sun, a comforting balm, warmed my face as I drained the last drops of my coffee, reflecting on the peculiar, often merciless algebra of familial dynamics. Veronica, in her flawed calculus, had presumed that relentless emotional coercion, compounded by unrelenting financial pressure, would inevitably yield unrestricted dominion over my entire estate. She had never not once factored in the potent equation that profound betrayal, when combined with measured time and incisive strategic thought, could culminate in a father who at long last truly comprehended the imperative of self-preservation. The tranquil expanse of Lake Serenity, now mirroring the sky's endless blue, silently affirmed a truth I was at last ready to embrace. Some conflicts conclude not with a neat reconciliation, but with the profound understanding that true peace is often predicated on the establishment of unequivocal distance. Indeed, some forms of genuine affection manifest through the setting of resolute boundaries rather than through unconditional capitulation. For the first time in 3 long, tumultuous years, I felt unequivocally powerfully like myself again.